Hello everyone and welcome to the 18th episode of Viral Banter. These episodes have been going for a while now and it really wish that we could be doing them in person, but we're making the best of the situation we have right now, and it's always good fun catching up with the Generation Liberty team, and we're so excited to have so many listeners tuning in. Today we are once more joined by four amazing guests, all coordinators and all part of the Generation Liberty team. Well, let's begin with a familiar face, our campus coordinator at Macquarie University, Anjali.
Hi Renee, it's good to be back on here.
Great to have you on the show again. And now our favourite medical student from Monash University, please welcome Peumike.
Great to be back on, Renee. Looking forward to a great show.
And another person from Monash University, because they are pumping out the talent these days, please welcome Luca back on the show.
G'day, Renee. Thanks for having me back on. I can't help noticing your background's changed a little bit. What's going on?
Actually, I did make a run for the border and have escaped Victoria. I'm in New South Wales hotel quarantine right now. I'm halfway through quarantine and I'm going to live with my husband's parents in New South Wales because I couldn't stand the house arrest anymore. So you can all be jealous.
Traitor. Peumike and I, we're still stuck here. We're gonna see it all the way through, even if it means binge watching shows.
Well, I can make you even more jealous because where I'm moving to actually is a beautiful seaside town called Kiama. And Zach's parents actually have a property right on the ocean. You just walk down the steps and you're like on the beach, and you can go to the beach in New South Wales there. So just, rub that in a little bit more.
Wow. I didn't know, at this point, I was worried that tap water was the only kind of water that existed. I haven't seen a large body of water in so long. This is insane.
How does freedom taste, Renee? How does freedom taste? Because we've forgotten the taste of it down here in Victoria.
Well, I'm actually, in hotel quarantine and I can't leave this room. So I've been stuck in this room. So this is like the least free I've been. But on the bus on the way here, I did see people walking about with no masks and pubs that were open. It was amazing. But moving on from my quarantine and where I am right now, we have a new member of the Generation Liberty team on the show today, which I'm very excited to introduce. Please welcome Mackenzie Cruikshank, who prefers to be called Mac, to the show.
Yes, that is my preferred introduction. It's fantastic to be here.
Mac, could you please tell us a little bit about yourself and what you are studying and why you're excited to be part of the Generation Liberty team?
I had the pleasure of moving here 9 years ago, and before that I'd lived in 4 other different countries, and by far Australia is the best that I've lived in. I'm studying philosophy, politics and international relations and history at Notre Dame University in Fremantle. I was really glad to jump on board because I'm all for the discussion about politics and ideas and whatnot, and I think an open discourse is the best form of discourse.
That's really good to hear, Max. So let's get our discussion going today. And let's start off by discussing a story from Sydney University, my old stomping ground, where earlier this week, a group of university students protesting on campus were broken up by police, and some of them were fined $1,000 each. So the issues that they were protesting against, they were actually trying to specifically say there were diverse different groups. So some of them were protesting cutbacks, some of them were protesting job losses, and some of them were protesting the changes that the coalition is making to university fees. There are only 19 protests in total, it looks from reports, and protesters were wearing masks and social distancing. They were met by a police force of 100 officers, it looks like from reports. Peumike, do you think this was a slight overreaction?
Absolutely, Renee. And look, I'm disappointed but not surprised. We've had this entire pandemic and now authorities think they have the power to trounce all liberties for the sake of pleasing their government masters. And to make it clear from the outset, there are 2 issues here. And we need to make sure we make this distinction because they're quite different. The content of what they were protesting and the police response. For the earlier, I've already been quite vocal about this. The fee changes are aligned with our national vision, and those who are protesting it have misplaced sentiments and should grow up a little bit. However, the police response, my God, that was shameful. no, it's very different to the Black Lives Matter protest, which was a clear breach of restrictions. We had 19 people here in a COVID-safe manner protesting issues that they cared about. And I would defend their right to do that any day. But then to have this armada of police officers to respond to that small group of people, it's the very definition of intimidation and fear-mongering to the point of forceful repression. And I'm reminded of the video that I saw a while back of the large group of police officers on the scene to arrest an elderly woman sitting on a park bench. And I think there was a couple of them. And we have these videos coming out all the time now, and it's quite disgusting to see. And I'm all for law enforcement protecting our rights and our civil liberties and it just existing in general. But in this case, in the cases in Victoria that we see, in the case with Zoe that we also see, they've just gone too far.
Yeah, I really agree there, Peumike. And Luca, Peumike makes a good point. We don't agree with, I assume most of us in Generation we probably don't agree with what these people were protesting. But as people who defend liberty would say that their right to do this is absolutely important and that they should have the right to do this. What are your thoughts on the police reaction?
Yeah, 100%. That's exactly right. It's like these people are merely exercising in a COVID-safe manner, mind you, in a state which is supposedly more free than Victoria. But now I'm starting to question your decision, Renee. They're protesting, and it's just exercising their civil liberties, right? And I'd like to pick up on a point that Peumike made, right? The police are supposed to protect those civil liberties. They're supposed to protect them, not actively go out against the people and start tearing them down when they exercise them. Obviously, the power's gone to their heads. Now, obviously, we're not pro defund the police or anything like that, but it's clear that the police are acting well beyond their powers, well beyond what they are supposed to be doing. And it's really quite frightening because then you hear about cases like Zoe, you hear about those two women on a park bench, you hear about the guy, the mental health patient who had his head stomped, all right? You hear about these things and you wonder what is going on. One of my mates from uni, a cop went into his backyard without knocking on his front door because he heard him playing loud music and was shining a torch through his door, trying to see if there was anyone else in the house. Is the power not going to their heads? There's no form of accountability whatsoever now, because both the government, the police, they're completely, the public sentiment is the public is its own enemy, right? You see the way that the vice chief of police, whatever his name is, he talks about how people who are protesting are dogs going back to eat their own vomit, how they're, quote, batshit crazy, right? That is the sentiment that we're getting from our own cops who are supposed to be protecting us. And it's absolutely insane, in my opinion.
I really agree there, Luca. And that's totally crazy, having like the cops shine their torches in when you're playing loud music. It reminds me of that. I don't know if you guys have seen that article, but a satirical article by The Shovel talking about the curfew in Victoria, and, you know, that Daniel Andrews is extending our bedtime to 9 o'clock and allowing us half an hour of reading time to 9:30. And that is definitely reading time, not screen time, not an excuse to play video games. And it's feeling very paternal, very patronizing what's going on. We're treating, adult citizens and all citizens of Australia like children, and the rules are being enforced a way that really doesn't acknowledge anyone's humanity or anyone's kind of own personal responsibility. Anjali, what are your thoughts on this?
I absolutely agree with all three of you and all points that have been stated, in particular the over-policing of our state, the fact that police are abusing their discretionary powers, even bringing in the public order riot squad to Sydney University. And I think it's a complete waste of the resources as well, because why do we need 100 police officers for 19 people that are protesting? And I can compare this to my own university. Just a week or so early, we also had a similar type of small-scale protest at our university cafeteria. And this was done socially distanced. Everyone was wearing a mask. They were able to protest and articulate their opinions as they should. And this was an area as well that was was heavily secured. There was security guards. It was heavily controlled in terms of the number of people that could enter the cafeteria area, and they were able to protest. So this indicates that we are able to socially distance and protest in a safe manner, and the use of the police in this disproportionate manner is both shocking and a testament to how we've become quite the police state.
Yeah, I really agree there. And, you know, the government itself has to kind of admit that people can protest and not spread this disease, because they are claiming that the BML march that happened in Victoria, which had thousands of people in attendance, they are claiming that there was zero COVID transmission there. So if that's the case, if thousands of people can group together to protest in, you know, support of that, then you would think that 19 people can gather and not spread this virus. The hypocrisy and the lack of consistency here is really, really worrying. Mac, what are your thoughts on this?
I think everyone else has raised good points of like the larger issues that this seems to represent, but looking at it on a smaller scale, these students are protesting the economic hardship that's come about because of the coronavirus. So to slap them in cases with $1,000 fines is just cruel in that sense. It doesn't seem like a just sort of punishment, even if they are found to be guilty of having violated these rules. It seems like an odd sort of punishment to dish out.
Yeah, I really agree there. And it seems, I don't know if many of you agree with this, like the voice of young people talking about the economic hardship that they are facing. And IPA research has shown that young people have been hit the hardest with unemployment, seems to be falling a lot on deaf ears. I think a lot of young people are getting frustrated that they feel like, you know, what's happening to them during this crisis is being completely pushed to the side and not really given any credence or any acknowledgement during this time. Anjali, do you think there's an element of truth to that?
Absolutely, I think so. I've seen a lot of my peers losing jobs and not being able to, even if they advocate for it, no one's listening to their voices. Their voices aren't being advocated on platforms, even in the news. So I think it's incredibly disappointing as well, and shows that government decision making doesn't really take into account all demographics within our society.
Yeah, I think that's a real point that a lot of young people are feeling right now. But moving on to a different topic, on this show, we talk a lot about cancel culture, and we have touched on the issue of what's been happening to J.K. Rowling. So there was a story this week that an Australian bookstore in WA is going to stop selling all books by J.K. Rowling. And of course, this is a private business and they have every right to do this. But it is a bit of a worrying sign, I think, of our culture when bookstores start banning books because of the views of the author. Anjali, what are your thoughts on this story?
I can first off start by saying that as a hardcore Harry Potter fan who looks to spread the love of J.K. Rowling's series with others, I'm deeply troubled to hear that there's a bookstore that's trying to phase out her books. We've already seen calls to burn her books already, screeching Twitter mobs, assaulting against her, and everyday cancellations. And I think we're living essentially in this deplorable episode within our society where a person's character, their livelihood, their career are being attacked for purported thought crime. For those with a bit of context to this, she did make some comments about the biological differences between males and females, and now she's being denounced as transphobic and hounded by the political correctness mob. So I think we're living in this self-perpetuating cycle of wokeness, and I know that book banning isn't something that is new. I mean, libraries have attempted to ban books that promote obscene or violent imagery, but this is a very different issue because it's based, as you've mentioned, on her personal views, which are completely and utterly unrelated and irrelevant to the actual content of their books, her books. So I don't dispute that a private business has the right to do what they want in their bookstore or what types of books they should have on their bookshelves. But I also think that as booksellers, they should be promoting this love of literature and readership. And essentially they're betraying this and contributing to this, you could say, stifling of freedom of expression of writers and literature within our society. All I can hope is that Rowling is too big, too established, and too global to easily be slain by these PC police, and therefore, hopefully, this act by the bookstore will hopefully prove to be futile.
Yeah, I think she doesn't have too much to worry about with all the royalties and how much she's earned from the books. And, you know, we've got to remember she came from, you know, the bottom. She was a single mother struggling with depression. I think she even had some moments of homelessness for a while before she read these books. So she's a real story of, you know, triumphing over harsh circumstances. But Luca, the bookstore commented that we always are trying to make Rabble, the bookstore, a safe place for our community. And part of this is trying not to sell books by transphobes or have them on the shelves. Have you ever entered a bookstore and felt unsafe, Luca?
Oh, all the time, Renee. All the time. I can't walk into like the science section because I feel like I'm being threatened with all of those scientific views. I generally stick to the picture book section because I find that the picture books are usually very, very neutral, and they really confirm my biases, if you know what I mean. But on a serious note, I will say that it's quite interesting that a bookstore is trying to be like a steward for the safety of the community. And I think they could be the ones to take the mantle from the police, who are clearly doing the opposite. But on another note as well, it seems rather interesting that the leftist circular firing squad is at it again. Because if you look at J.K. Rowling, she's a pretty hardcore feminist. I mean, there was that whole meme that was going around about how she said Hermione was always meant to be black, but in the book it says Hermione's white face. Like, that was a thing for a while, right? So she's clearly one of them, if we could use that term. And yet, because of her view, because I'm pretty sure her view was like, no, we need to stand up for women as their own, like, women are women, that's it, right? Because feminism and women are strong and that kind of stuff. That's the perspective she was coming from, right? And now they're shutting her down. So it just goes to show that, like, all these different views on one side, and they're trying to stick them all together as the progressives. And it's not working because you have now lefties going after each other. I say we just sit back and let it happen because they're just annihilating themselves at this point. But I will say I was never a huge fan of Harry Potter. Unfortunately, I was never a huge fan of Harry Potter. I can't say I read like the first 2 books and I was like, this isn't quite for me. But censoring someone because of their views is straight out of like Fahrenheit 451. It was in Fahrenheit 451 where they burned every book that was mildly controversial because this one's anti-smoking, the smokers will get offended. This one's anti-gay, the LGBTQI will get offended, right? That lobby will get offended. That's what we're coming to. So yes, when I said that I can only go to the picture book section, I'm not even sure if that's going to be safe very soon, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think this whole like left in itself is also just like this cancel culture mob are insatiable. You may think that like throwing them a few bones will like get them off your scent, but you don't, get a vampire off your trail by giving them a little bit of your blood. Like, it's just going to make things worse. And I think maybe J.K. Rowling is coming around to that realization right now. Mac, what are your thoughts on this bookstore getting rid of all books by J.K. Rowling and even books under her pseudonym as well?
Well, I find it quite a sight to behold, the purity spiral that you see going on in these fields. It seems the faster that it spins, the lower the depths that it sinks to. The easiest way to resolve this is to understand that you can separate the artwork from the artist. The author can be as bigoted or transgendered, hating as much as they want, but as long as that's not reflected within the work itself, I think it even fails to be characterized as disseminating those ideas. So in that sense, I feel sorry for her in that sense, definitely.
Yeah, and I really agree there. Like, I don't think they are related at all. But I actually wrote an article for Helen Pluckrose's magazine Aereo a while ago talking about this issue. And I kind of argued that there is an underlying issue for why the cancel culture mob is constantly going after J.K. Rowling, because this isn't the first instance. And this is a generation that kind of grew up on Harry Potter. And I'm actually surprised that, Luca, you didn't like the Harry Potter books. Not that that's uncommon, but I've actually argued within this article that one of the reasons that these books are being rejected is actually because they contain a lot of Jungian concepts, that they are about, you know, embracing your shadow, about that you can make mistakes. Like the last book, you've discovered that Dumbledore was like hanging out with Grindelwald when he was young and hanging out with all these dark wizards, and only once he makes this grave mistake does he become like the man that he is. So I've kind of identified that as one of the reasons that the left kind of can't come to terms with Harry Potter anymore, because it's actually really anti-cancel culture. Like if there were statues of Dumbledore, I think they would be pulling them down right now. Peumike, you are into psychology like me. Do you think I've got a point here?
Oh, you have a great point there, Renee. It's funny because I feel that what's happening here with the radical leftists and their kind of repression of any thought which doesn't correlate to their own perspective is that they're trying to approach a kind of safe space. They want to create an environment in which they have only people that they agree with around them, and they only have views that they agree with around them. And that's quite destructive, because that also limits the progress of society and also the progress of individuals. You talk about it, there are the themes discussed even within Harry Potter itself, the idea of self-development through identifying one's own shadows and through identifying one's own deficiencies. If you don't have the perspective of other people around you, or even any difference in belief, that self-examination or self-evaluation cannot be explored, because you feel that you are correct 100% at the time. But I do think an important point to make here is that these radical leftists who repress that kind of speech are a minority perspective, and they're only given weight by the social media sphere and them kind of grouping up in small groups on Twitter to attack whatever it is on any given day. I mean, who the hell knows what Rabble is or who Rabble is? It's a borderline irrelevant bookstore catering towards a niche demographic. And the social media attack on J.K. Rowling is, again, from those same kind of perpetrators who have huddled together on social media under the guise of anonymity. So that's essentially my take on it. And I do think it's really just an approach towards safety. They feel very safe in what they are, without having the thoughts of the opposition. And in doing so, they have no chance for self-evaluation and self-improvement, and they are stuck in their own kind of dastardly ways.
Yeah, and I really agree there. And I think when you don't kind of do that self-evaluation and that self-development, that criticism, which, you know, should actually be directed internally and looking at your own flaws, gets expelled outwards. And I think that's a lot of what cancel culture is these days. It's, you know, I'm not the problem. Everyone else is the problem. You're the racist. You're the bigot. You're the horrible person, which makes you feel better and stops you from kind of looking at yourself and your own flaws. It's just a little bit too much of these days of, you know, self-love, you're perfect the way you are, you don't need to change, society is the problem, not you. And I think that's actually what's fueling cancel culture right now. So something else that has hit the headlines this week was a former economist from the Treasury Department in Victoria who quit his job in protest as he is pointing out the police state that is occurring in Victoria and the overreach of the Victorian government. Luca, can you explain this story a little bit and tell us your thoughts?
Yeah, sure. So it was just, I believe his name was Mr. Sanjeev Sabwak, who immigrated from India in 2001. So he's someone who's clearly come to Australia because he's like, you know what, Australia seems like a pretty good place. So he comes across and he finds that the government here is absolutely insane during this time. And because he put up critical Twitter posts and put up things on his blog that basically said to the effect that, like, the current premier and the government is aberrating everyone's human rights, and they're they basically need to be jailed. He was asked to take those down. And he said, yeah, nah, because they asked him to take down all of his posts. So he decided he'd quit. Now, I think this speaks to the wider trend of the government, to be honest, because if you have a look at, for example, the pregnant lady who was arrested because she tried to set up that protest under stage 3 lockdowns out in Ballarat. Compare that to the Black Lives Matter protests, which occurred under stage 3 lockdowns in Melbourne, and there were 40,000 people, right? So the only key difference between her protest and the BLM protest was that hers was anti-government policy, was that hers was anti-Andrews and his mob, right? And she was taken down. Now look at Mr. Shablock, right? He was anti what the government was doing. And they tried to take him down. And he left government so that he could speak freely. That speaks a lot to what our government has become, right? And it just seems so striking to me that now the government is playing the game of whoever is going against us, whoever is not with the experts, right? Even though the experts didn't say that a curfew was a good idea, but whatever, right? These are the same people. This government is going after people who are against them. And if that's not dictatorship, I don't know what is.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point there, Luca. And also one of the differences between these two groups is that I'm pretty sure Daniel Andrews was counting on the fact that most people at the BML protests would vote for him, or at least preference him after the Greens, and people like this economist, people like Zoe, and people who are anti-lockdowns probably are not going to vote for him. So he doesn't see them as valuable, and that's really concerning. Peumike, what are your thoughts on this economist's resignation?
Yeah, well, first of all, whilst I don't support everything the Economist has to say, I highly, highly commend his bravery. It's very rare nowadays, and his recognition and his resignation is a testament to that. But yes, this entire story has quite damaging ramifications on the political scene, because it essentially illustrates the extent to which this Andrews government can go in not only restricting people physically, but also psychologically, because now apparently even verbal dissent on anything to do with the Andrews government or the status quo is not allowed. I mean, where are we living? We're not living in China. We're living in Australia. We're living in Victoria, and surely something like this shouldn't happen. And even incitation, or whatever that means, is illegal now as well. The hashtag Free Zoe campaign by the IPA is something that we should really support and get behind. So I recommend any listeners to support that campaign and check out all of our social media channels for that promotion. But it's just ridiculous to see the kind of nonsense that's happening in Victoria at the moment. And we see this in Parliament, even to this day, when the Andrews government is pushing forward this agenda of giving public servants the ability to make arrests with minimal to no justification. And we're on a very slippery slope here in Victoria, and we have to be very careful that we never forget our values, and we never forget the importance of autonomy and liberty.
Yeah, I really agree there. And actually, exciting news, I actually designed this week some Free Zoe stickers that the IPA will have some of soon. So I'll make sure that some Generation Liberty members get their hands on that, so we can make sure that we get this Free Zoe campaign as much support as possible. But talking about government overreach, let's talk about government spending as well, which this economist also wasn't happy about. And welcome back, a popular game on this show, and that is The Price is Right with government spending. So this game is just like the normal Price is Right. You all have to give me a guess of how much you think was spent on this particular government program, or government what was spent or lost. Some of them are actually losses by the government, and whoever is the closest without going over gets the points. So the Queensland Premier has spent a lot of taxpayers' money on coronavirus-related polling, despite previously claiming she relies solely on the Chief of Health Officer for advice. How much has the Premier spent on polling? And I'll give you a guess. I'll give you a little bit of a range just so you have something to play with. It is under $1 million. So, Anjali, we'll start with you.
I'm just going to go for a wild guess here and say maybe 750,000.
Okay. And Luca, what are you going to go with?
I'm going to be a tad more optimistic and go with 700,000.
And Peumike, what is your guess?
I'm going to go 699,000.
Okay. And Mac, what is your guess?
In the full pessimist, I'll go 850,000.
Well, I think you're all a little bit too pessimistic. I think Peumike has to take the points, even though he still did go over, but she did still spend a whopping $528,000
We weren't
on
that
polling.
pessimistic. We weren't that pessimistic.
Yeah, a little bit, just a little bit more. Yes, so she spent that much money on polling when she says all her advice just comes from medical experts and not from populist opinion. So that's a little bit concerning. And on to question 2. Victoria's government has also been spending money in very questionable areas. We know that in the June quarter in Victoria, wages paid to private sector employees fell by $1.91 billion. How much extra money was paid to the public sector during this time? I'll give you a slight range. It is between 50 million and $100 million. So we'll start with you, Peumike.
50 million and 100 million. So just going to repeat that last bit of the question. How much was given?
So this was during the June quarter. How much did the Victorian government spend on the public sector during this time?
On public sector. 45 million.
Okay, Luca, your question.
I believe the range was 50 to 100. So I'm going to go absolutely pessimistic and go 93 million.
Okay, Anjali.
I'm going to go with 80 million.
And Mac.
I'll go 68 million.
Anjali gets the points. It is $88 million in extra public service spending whilst people are losing their jobs. Absolutely insane. And now, how much extra money has been spent on the public sector across Australia this year? So what has the increase been on the public sector this year? So the guess I will give you is it's under $1 billion.
Sick, thanks for that. That really helps narrow the field.
It's under $1 billion and above 500 million. Okay.
In the IPM, they had a really nice graphic on Twitter, which like research on that.
Okay, I'll start with you, Mac, this time.
Ooh, it's a tough one. I'll say 750 million.
Okay. And Anjali?
I'm going to go with 850 million.
Luca?
I'll go in the middle and go 800 million.
And Peumike?
770.
Oh, very close there, Peumike, but I'm going to have to give the points to Mac because you did go over. It is $768 million.
He was literally $1,000 off, like $1 mil off. Surely.
No, if you don't go over, you get extra points. So the point goes to Mac. And it is during this time, so there was an increase of 768 million spent on the public sector. And during this time, private sector wages decreased by $5.8 billion. So that's pretty shocking.
At least we know the government's doing well.
We're all in this together, Luca. We're all in this together. Don't you know that?
Yes, that's why Andrews gave himself a pay rise last year, because we're all in this together and he's working so hard.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. As we mentioned earlier in this show, young Australians have incurred 35% of the net job losses since the outbreak of this pandemic, even though they account for only 15% of the workforce. What is the forecast amount of debt that young people will be forced to pay off over the next 3 years? And that is at a federal level. I'm just going to leave this out there. It is a big number. So I'm just going to let you guess big. So we'll start with you, Luca.
Big, like big? All right.
Big.
Let's go with $38 billion.
Okay. And Anjali?
20 billion.
Peumike?
I think I saw somewhere that, like, for every week that Victoria is in lockdown, the entire federal economy loses $4 billion. So I know this is going to be a big number. I don't know. I can't even imagine.
Do you want to do the maths on that one?
I don't want to.
Think Dr. Evil level big.
Oh, I don't know. I'm going to go 90 billion.
Okay. And Mac?
$1 trillion.
Mac, you get the points. It's $1 trillion.
Oh my God!
What?
Mac is doing very well. He got the clue of it is Dr. Evil level big.
Oh my God!
We have to laugh or else we will cry. We're all doomed.
Yeah, I don't think I was pessimistic enough at all. This is going to be great.
And Luca did touch on this before. Despite thousands of job losses and business closures across the country and across the state that he runs, Daniel Andrews also decided to give himself a pay rise this year. How much was this pay rise? It is under 100,000. So I'll give you that guess. We'll start with you, Mac, who is leading.
I'd say 60,000.
Okay, Luca?
Well, I remember in like 2019, he gave himself a 10% pay rise. I think all the premiers got a pay rise, but he got the biggest. It was like 40,000 or something. So yeah, look, I wouldn't be surprised if, because he's doing all the hard yards, because, you know, some pigs are more equal than others, right? I wouldn't be surprised if it was somewhere like higher than that. So I'm going to go with 55K.
Okay, and Peumike?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a reasonable estimate, because I think it's like somewhere around 15-ish%. And the Premier gets paid more than the Prime Minister by a considerable amount here in Victoria. Maybe about 47,000.
Okay, and Anjali?
50K.
I think the points have to go to Peumike. You were very, very close. It was $46,522.
Oh,
why is he always like slightly off? This is ridiculous.
Very close. But I do think, that actually makes it Peumike and Mac are drawn, I think, because you both had 2 points. So they are our 2 victors for today's The Price is Right. But talking about competitive elements, I thought today, before we close the show, that we would talk about a very exciting event coming up, which is the Generation Liberty versus Socialist Alternative debate on the topic capitalism is better than socialism, which is a bit of a tradition in Generation Liberty. Many past coordinators have participated, in IPA alumni like Simon Breeny, Matthew Lash, John Hajek. So Luca, you are going to be one of the debaters participating. Are you keen for this event, which is almost, a rite of passage for coordinators?
I am so ridiculously excited, not only because I'm in lockdown, it's probably the most interesting thing that's going to have happened all year, but also because it's just a chance. Can we finally put a nail in the coffin on this one, please? Except I don't want them to, because it's always fun to have these kinds of debates. We'll see how it goes. I'm very excited.
Yeah, well, if you do manage to put a nail in the coffin, you'll be achieving something that many, many coordinators have not done before you, despite, I think, in nearly every year, so we do kind of polling for the audience. I think nearly every single debate capitalism wins, but they keep coming back for a little bit more brutality. Peumike, I think you've been catching up watching some of the previous debates. Are you excited for this event?
I'm over the moon excited for this event. It's going to be so good. I'm so looking forward to it, to debate with Luca as well. It's always fun to debate socialists, especially socialist alternative, because they bring up very interesting points, and it gets quite passionate. And I've seen that from the past debates as well. So unfortunately, we don't have the crowd, because the socialist crowd always adds a bit of fun to the entire thing. But I think we'll actually get to hear our arguments this time instead of their screeching over Zoom. So I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be so much fun.
And Anjali, have you ever attended one of these debates or seen one of these debates online, the capitalist versus socialist debates?
Not that particular debate, so I'm very keen to see how it unfolds.
Yes, it is definitely going to be an exciting event. And the date that we are looking at now is October 9th, and that's going to be at 6 p.m. There will be more details put up on the Generation Liberty page in the next few days. And we hope to have as many Generation Liberty listeners tuning in as possible. But for now, I would love to thank everyone for an absolutely awesome show of Viral Banter. Thank you, Anjali, Luca, Peumike, and Mac for joining me. And if you are not a member of Generation Liberty yet, what are you doing? It is only $10 to join, and you will get a bag of goodies full of awesome freedom-loving merch, free books, stickers, bottle openers, webcam covers. What a really, really fun goodie bag worth more than $10. So sign up and make sure your friends sign up as well. But for now, thank you for listening, and make sure that you stay safe, stay philosophical, stay happy, and stay free.